Hello and welcome to the Choralosophy Podcast, a weekly podcast whose mission is multifaceted. Each week when you tune in, you will find episodes that question best practices, challenge music education dogma, facilitate conversations about touchy topics, demonstrate pedagogies, and conversations where colleagues learn from each other. This is episode 297. Give them tools and let them build, part 6, the data episode. We're going to be talking about quick and easy ways that will not overwhelm you to keep track of whether or not your students individually in a group class like a choir class or band class or orchestra class are getting better. They're becoming better musicians, they're becoming more literate, they're becoming more confident, and their skills are really growing. Now, this can be a challenge, especially in places where your class size might be 35 or 45 or 80 like mine, where your colleagues around the building might have classes of 20, right? And their ability to keep track of their students' individual growth is built right in, it's baked in. But for many of us, the way that we grew up in a choir class, that was not baked in. Because the hard truth for some of us, I think, to really deal with in ensemble music is that we are one of the only places in a school where a student in many cases can simply show up, move their mouth on the stage of the concert, show up to the concert after school, not punch anybody, and get an A. Now, of course, I'm being facetious a little bit, but for the most part, we have created that reputation for ourselves as ensemble music directors, which is what leads administrators often to not consider us to be a real class, or other colleagues in our buildings not treating us with the respect of a real class. Now, of course, some of that is on them, but some of it is on us. We have not really earned that reputation because of how rare it is, especially in choral music, but I would also say band and orchestra could do a better job of this, of keeping individual data. How do I know individual students are getting better? Now, I'm going to make a hot take right off the bat here for you choir teachers, and then hopefully you'll stick with me all the way to the end, which is to say that if our students are not singing by themselves, then we are not grading individual work. Because when a student is singing and allowing someone else next to them to guide them along, we really don't have evidence that they are learning. And we don't have evidence that they have learned the skill that it is that we are assessing. So, of course, in a choir class, there are times and places, including in this episode you'll hear, where we assess them while they're singing with other people. But I do believe that the individual part does need to get there as well. Because let's be honest, in most choir classes, kids are never assessed by themselves. I think this is something we need to wrap our heads around as a profession. We avoid it, of course, because we hide behind the need or what we believe is a need for psychological safety within the ensemble sound, or we defend it under the guise of not wanting to traumatize kids with solo singing. But let's call it what it is. It is infrastructure that is built for us to not be accountable for that individual child's learning. And we need to figure out ways to manage those issues, because the issue of being afraid to sing by yourself is a real one, but we can manage it. And we're going to talk about that in this episode. So stick around all the way to the end. I will probably challenge some of your methodologies, but as always, anytime I present an episode like this that is a how to or a way for teachers to set up infrastructure in their classrooms, what I'm hoping is always that you will listen, that you will take from it what you can, or even if you take nothing from it, that you have gathered a perspective that can help inform other decisions that you make along the way. So I hope you find this helpful. And if you have any questions, of course, you can head over to the Facebook page, Choralosophers, and over to the Substack, choralosophy.substack.com, where there will be a post accompanying this episode on the Substack that aggregates, some really cool and important ways our whole series from last summer, which was the First Days of Choir series, and this Give Them Tools series. It puts them all into a one-stop shop with links to each individual episode, summaries of the different parts of building our infrastructure that really do need to happen before the school year starts, which is why I'm trying to get this series, which this will be the final episode in this Give Them Tools series, and the First Days series done mid-July-ish, so that you have time for most places where you start school to process some of this material and get some of it ready for the school year. Your music program or event deserves a platform that does it all, without the extra costs. With Ludus, you get seamless ticketing, built-in marketing, powerful fundraising, and volunteer management, where volunteers can sign up, schedule shifts, and track hours with ease. Need to sell merchandise and concessions in person? Ludus Retail lets you log sales by each group, track inventory, keep everything organized. Hosting music lessons or theater camps? They have a classes feature. which makes registration and student tracking effortless. And it's free for your organization. Thousands of programs already trust Ludus because they help you focus on what matters most, the performance. We all love to travel with our students, but we definitely don't love planning a trip. I know I've been there as the point person for details, and it is a nightmare. Forms, payments, fundraising, it's a never-ending task that takes away from doing what we love. That's where Kaleidoscope Adventures comes in. They've been planning performance trips for more than 30 years and handle all the details from start to finish. And one of the best parts about Kaleidoscope, they have crowdfunding options for every traveler. Contact Kaleidoscope Adventures at mykatrip.com to find out how they can take your travel beyond expectations. Underwriting and crucial support for this show comes from listeners themselves who choose to subscribe on Patreon or now on Substack. Subscribers get access to the private podcast feed as well as my Google folder full of goodies and much more. Okay, let's dig in here to what would be the pivot for a lot of us. And I again will say that this pivot happened for me too. So I am speaking from the experience of doing it other ways and coming to this idea of individual data and keeping track over long periods of time since I've been in my position now for 20 years. Keeping track of that long-term data is so helpful for me to be able to rebuild myself as an educator every year, to be able to come back into the classroom with new, fresh ideas. Even though my program the people in my program would describe it as very steeped in tradition, we've done a lot of things that we did 100 years ago, at least I'm at high school or at my school. That's great, but behind the scenes, under the hood, we are changing things every year. And one of the ways that I justify those changes is by looking back at past year's data, growth trends, things that we're teaching well, things that we are not teaching well, and then trying to figure out ways to build on that each time. So the pivot is that we're hiding individual deficiencies behind a wall of collective sound, which isn't really teaching, it's camouflage. If a student can't demonstrate a musical skill by themselves, then honestly, guys, they haven't learned it, and you haven't taught it. We are going to stop grading compliance, which is what happens when they just show up and move their mouth, and start tracking growth. This is my plea. So let's talk about the infrastructure of how to do it. I'm going to have you start with a thought experiment. Let's call it a choir class of 20. And you have a strongest singer in each section. You're an SATB choir, and you have a clear leader in each section. And on the day of the concert, all 4 of those leaders have come down with an illness. None of them will be there. Do you start to sweat? What about on the day of an important rehearsal? Do those 4 singers not being in your crucial rehearsal cause you to start to sweat? It's possible. Then what that means is that you have not distributed the knowledge and the tools of how to make music without someone else's help to the whole choir. And that those leaders are doing a little bit more of the work than they should. Do all choirs have leaders? Do my choirs have leaders? Absolutely. But when they're gone, we still get work done. And this is one of the ways that we do that. I am able to use my data to figure out which of those kids are struggling to understand what's going on and help get them up to speed, at least not until they're as good as everyone else. That's not really the point, that until they're able to contribute. And that is, we're bringing the bottom up. A rising tide lifts all boats, to quote JFK. So the first data source that I use is keeping track of literacy level. Primary tools for this are Sight Reading Factory and just a Google form that generates a Google spreadsheet. It's as simple as that. Very, very easy. What our goal is to measure independent sight reading ability, not how they stand in the group and follow, but how they process the music reading information all by themselves and how their ability to do this progresses over time. Now, some strategies that go into this, I'm going to try to keep all this really short and succinct, and then you can dig into other episodes that have gone deeper onto all of these topics by heading over to the Music Literacy Hub, which is choralosophy.com/music literacy, and you can find lots of episodes on all these things. The strategies are to establish a baseline, and I usually do this in the first quarter of the year. So now I will say I do it in the first quarter, early October, because it takes a little bit of time to build some procedures and some safety, personal safety between me and the students before we go off by ourselves and do these things. Now, I would say that if I taught in a district where kids had time and programs built in middle school, since I started 9th grade, where they've been singing by themselves and doing independent reading work consistently since 6th grade, like some places do, well, then I would do this even sooner. I would do this in week 1 or 2. So don't take my situation of doing it in October as being gospel. That's not really the point. The point is that when I feel like they're ready to do that first attempt, we go do it, and that establishes our baseline. What I do is I take kids one at a time, and it takes about 4 or 5 minutes, and I usually set up a sight reading factory level 2 for ninth graders. And what I'm trying to do, and I explain this all to them, is I'm trying to have them demonstrate for me whether or not that is a good place for them to start, whether it's too hard or too easy. And for most ninth graders, I would say probably 95% of them in my situation, a level 1, 2, or 3 ends up being a place where they can, if we picture like a new reader of English, they can read the exercise. They're just not reading it fluently. They can go through the exercise and stop and think and sound out the next note interval, and they can maybe kind of not keep a perfectly steady beat, but they can move forward with a little bit of a herky-jerky motion, but they can read it. Similarly to if I read a sentence in English and I'm pausing and sounding thing, I'm reading it, I'm just not reading it fluently. So what I'm actually looking for in that pretest with the beginners, the very first baseline, is I'm reading at what level of sight reading factory? 1, 2, or 3 usually. If it's a kid who doesn't match pitch, of course, one thing I love about sight reading factory, I can find the pitches that they can match and build them a custom exercise. But usually, most kids, 1, 2, or 3. And I'm listening for whether or not they can read that level in that herky-jerky way. That's exactly where I want them. I want them to start with a level that is herky-jerky, because then we set a goal for December, the end of the semester. They're going to do this as a final exam. That's my next chance to check in and add to this data pool. Because every time they do these little check-ins, I'm keeping a Google spreadsheet, which you can find in my Patreon drive if you're a paid subscriber there. I keep a little Google form that just is a very simple place to drop notes and drop what level we settled on. And then in December, the same form gets opened, and we add at their final exam, have they move towards fluency? Because keeping in mind, we've already set a level where they can read it, they just need to think a lot about it. And then, of course, we're assigning things throughout the semester, individual work on Sight Reading Factory, checking back with them again in December to see if they've moved towards fluency. And many kids do, even in that short one semester, from herky-jerky level 1 to fluent level 1 by December. If they are fluent in December, then we move them to level 2 for May, for the second semester final. And that's a third opportunity in person with one-on-one instruction over the course of the year to keep track of this data of what level are they reading, but not just what level are they reading, what challenges are they having? Why do we think they are having those challenges? And of course, the why comes from my music reading rope that I developed over a year ago. And are they having muscle coordination problems? Is it an audiation problem? Do they drift away from where the tonal center is? Are they having trouble remembering the tonic 30 seconds later? Those types of things. And we can keep notes of that in the spreadsheet, and then we have this data growing. Now, of course, if most kids stay with me all 4 years of high school, I now have this growth pattern that I can show over the course of all 4 years. Oftentimes they end up going from that level 1 all the way to that level 6 or sometimes 7 or 8 over the course of their time in high school. So the things that we're tracking, essentially, if an administrator does ask, we're tracking rhythmic accuracy, pitch stability, and the ability to internalize and perform with some type of a steady macro beat. And we're also tracking whether or not the student is able to do this without teacher help. Because anytime I have to step in and help the student negotiate the exercise, navigate the exercise, I also make a note of that in the sheet. For example, it could be as simple as a little sentence typed in saying, needed help getting back to the key, needed help keeping a steady beat, needed to be reminded to do their count singing. If you want to go to the other Give Them Tools episodes, you should be listening to those ones first. So we're keeping track of all that. Now, once this assessment is done, the first one, the student now has tools also. They know what level they should be working at so that they don't frustrate themselves, but that they can also be successful. They also know which level to use for auto-assessment. Sight Reading Factory has an auto-assessment feature. And once they invented that, I changed the way that I gave these kids feedback because it's a new tool that's remarkable, which is that it will show them in real time which notes were right and which notes were wrong. The problem with that tool, though, is that in my way of instructing, I want them to stop and think as a way to figure out the next thing, because you cannot learn to read fluently if your students don't, or if you do not have the chance to go through that phase of learning. You can't skip the phase of sounding things out to learn to read a language. So I don't want the Sight Reading Factory auto assessment tool to be the only way my students are assessed, because then that would be forcing them to skip the sounding out phase. Because if you stop and pause and sound something out with an auto assessment, it'll tell you it's wrong. It'll give you a 2% or whatever. And I don't want that on my students' conscious. So let's say I have a ninth grader who is assigned to a level 2 when they are doing an in-person assessment, where I'm encouraging them to stop and think. I would then also send them an email that shows them that when they do auto assessment, they should be doing level 1, because then they have a chance to sing something more fluently while working ahead to develop their sounding out ability with more challenging episodes. So the tool for the teacher ends up being this quick and easy little rubric that says, what level is this student? What are some of their challenges? When they're doing auto assessment, what level should they be doing? And then there's also ways in a Google Sheet. I'm not going to go into it. You're going to have to Google this if you don't know how to do it. But once you've set all this up in a Google Sheet, it can automatically email each of your students privately to show them their rubric, to show them what level they should be doing if they're in person, what level should they be doing if they're online individually with auto, and then that puts the tools in their hands. If they want to get better, they can. And what oftentimes happens is that we will have kids that will make the choice that they want to do more than is assigned so that they can move up. They don't want to be the only kid in their section that's level 1, so they want to move up to level 2, in which case we just tell them, email us, hey, we think that I think I'm bored at level 1, Mr. Muntz, will you please let me move up to level 2? And I tell them that they're going to have to come sing it for me. Come show me. I want to see. Or turn in some auto assessments that prove that you are just firing on all cylinders, and we'll just move you up to the next level. Because what I want them to do is constantly have that slight struggle. It's that sound. I want them always in their sounding out phase, which is why I love Sight Reading Factory, because now they will let us move a kid all the way up to level 7s and 8s, which honestly for years in our program, we've needed the level 7 and 8s for individual kids, and they didn't have it because we got to level 6 by 11th grade for a lot of kids, and they were bored, because I didn't have the ability to get them into that kind of phase of sounding things out. So I was doing something called level 6 plus before Sight Reading Factory came out with level 7 and 8. What I was essentially doing was throwing things at them metaphorically while they were reading the level 6, because it was so easy for them that I needed to add a challenge. So I would say, sight read this while snapping on beats 2 and 4, or sight read this while swaying back and forth, or while standing on one foot. Like I was always coming up with all these ways to kind of interrupt their brains so that they had a challenge. But now the website does have level 7 and 8, which is great. So then when a student graduates, not only do I have evidence that I helped them learn to read music, but they do too. They can go back if they want. Most of the time they don't, because they know how much better they've gotten. But I now have that ability to reflect on the teaching practices that happened in the classroom to figure out which ways helped us get which ways were working and which ways weren't. I don't know if you've heard about it. If you haven't heard about it, you've got to go try 3-Minute Theory. You can go to 3minutetheory.com and you can check it out now when you decide to get this comprehensive system of pre-made materials for your music theory related concepts. You just go into that account and pull out tons of ready-made material. I don't think you'll be even able to teach all of it in 1 year. It's so much stuff that you can tailor make and custom make to your needs. So go check it out. And of course, use the Choralosophy discount code when you sign up to get a 15% discount on your membership. So examples, I've shared this on the show before, but one of the examples I took out of this spreadsheet a few years back and actually used it in the classroom to help everyone get better was I started to notice that our kids were really good at pitch and kind of okay at rhythm. They were excellent at pitch and kind of okay at rhythm. And so I thought, do we really need to choose? We need to figure out how to get better at rhythm too. And that's what led to the introduction of takadimi. And this last year has led to the introduction of our kind of innovative way of adding count singing on long notes, takadimi on shorter notes, adding in those other tools, and the ability of our kids now to sing on time has dramatically increased. But 3 years from now, I'm going to look at that data and I'm going to look for more holes, and we're going to keep trying to fill it, because I don't believe there's ever a time when we're going to stop getting better. That's the goal. Okay, now moving on to another assessment tool, we're going to talk about ways that we can check in formally and informally on kids' actual singing ability, their vocal technique, their ensemble singing skills, etc. Now, we do this through a system of part checks where we invite, it's not an invitation, I guess it's a requirement, but it's part of the grade of the class where periodically we have a singing test where 2 students from each part come down out of the choir. There's lots of ways to do this, but I do allow them to choose who they go with. unless we don't have volunteers, in which case I just point at people and say, you're up, come on down, need some soprano twos, okay, you and you. Announced, well, we don't have any altos, come on down, and we just create a group. So let's say it's an SSA piece. That means 6 students with 6 music stands would be down in front of the teacher, facing away from the class so that they don't have that intimidation factor of looking right at their classmates to sing, but they are doing it in a pressure environment where other kids can hear them. Now, that is all very intentional. Now, by doing it this way, we can do it in class. We can also do it in a way that helps everybody get better, because they're going to take that crucial section of the piece that we have assigned for this test. Let's say it's Andrea Ramsey's Grow Little Tree, and it's measures 42 to measure 65, and the kids knew ahead of time for like 6 weeks, kids knew ahead of time for a week or two where that test was going to be, and it was chosen by the teacher because it's a crucial place that helps demonstrate some real singing skills, some vocal techniques, and maybe some notes and rhythms that are tricky. And it encourages the kids to really focus on that section. By doing it in class, it also helps everyone get better at that section. So one of the side benefits, even though this is about individual skills, I guess, in this episode, but as the group gets better after that test, because they sit down and they hear each other sing through all of these sections, and they get to hear their own pitfalls and imagine themselves singing it and hear each other's problems. So after we bring the 6 kids down, we have this, again, super easy to click rubric. This is another rubric that you can find in my Patreon drive. It is a very simple 3-category rubric with a 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4 in each category. The categories are pitch and rhythm, tone production, and ensemble singing skills. And each of those categories have possibility of 4 to 0, 4 being the strongest, 0 being basically I couldn't hear you. That's how we describe it to the kids. A 4 means you're demonstrating all the skills in the rubric all of the time, like all of the time. It is a polished performance. A 3 means that you are demonstrating those skills pretty darn close to all of the time. In other words, you've established proficient mastery of that skill. You're just not doing it all the time. And so what we're working on there from a 3 to a 4 is consistency. Is this built into your DNA as a singer, or is it something you're still exploring? But a 3, we teach kids, you should be very proud of the 3. It's a really, really strong score. A 2 is a score we would give in any of these categories for a student who is demonstrating that they can do the things in the rubric, but whether or not they are is kind of hit and miss throughout the exercise, throughout the portion of the song that they're singing. That beautiful resonant tone, for example, might show up all of a sudden in a comfortable part of their voice, but then they go into a different part of their voice that they haven't figured out, and we can't hear them anymore, and that beautiful resonant tone goes away. Oh, where'd she go? That might show up being a 2. Okay. Then a 1 would be a kid who almost never demonstrates that skill. We can hear them. We can hear that there is singing happening, and we can hear that in general the notes and rhythms are right, for example, but we're not hearing that consistently, and we're hardly ever hearing evidence of it, all the way down to the kid who does sometimes just go up there and not move their mouth and make almost no effort, and that is the 0 on the. So all of those things go together. Now, each portion of the song might be 45 seconds to 60 seconds. We usually do 2 snippets of a song for each test. So they come down with their folder, they sing that snippet, they sing the next snippet, and since the rubric is clickable, we're able to just click, 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 1 score for each of the 3 categories, and hit save. We can then move through every 2 minutes or so. We've got another group of 6. So in a class, so let's say it's a class of 36, you got 6 groups of 6, and they all come up 2 on a part. If we have one section is uneven, for example, we might have somebody come back up again and sing again, and we tell them that they can use the best of their 2 scores to incentivize them to come up and sing again. And we get through everybody. We could do a class of 6. In my 44-minute classes, we could do 6 groups of 6 in one class period. And we've done that formal assessment. We've given kids direct and specific feedback, because the language on the rubric is very specific of what it is that they were doing or not doing, that without having to have a private voice lesson, in that ensemble. But because they're such a small group and we're sitting so close to them, they just set up their little horseshoe right in front of me. I can hear them individually. It's a group test, but we're still able to give them individual feedback. So on this one, what we're tracking overall for the administrator and for ourselves is tone production, breath management, vowel alignment, intonation, diction, mimics, And the rubric is built to include language about all of those things at their various developmental stages. Now, one of the things I love about this over time for those 4-year students is they're able to see their scores start to move from those 0s, 1s, and 2s, which is actually very common for our beginners, and move left, so to speak, on the rubric into being 2s and 3s by 10th grade. In 11th grade, they're starting to get some more solid 3s. And I'm pretty tough with this rubric. A lot of times kids get their first 4 in 12th grade. And they get really excited. Not only are they becoming better singers, but they're getting better scores on harder songs. Because as these tests continue in their choir experience, they're getting better at music reading, they're getting better, they're getting more confident, they're building vocal skill, and then through this rubric, and they're moving left on it over time, they can see that growth. And that's a beautiful thing. More importantly, I can see that growth so that I can continue to be a better teacher from year to year. Now, the other aspect of it is the peer aspect. By doing it in front of each other, they are building resilience also as it relates to singing and out in front of people and having their voice be heard and evaluated. That is part of a performing arts curriculum. Another real brief one, real simple one that I use is dictation and theory, keeping track in a very informal way. I wish this one, actually, I would love it if I could do more of this. But in the short class period, this is kind of a decision that I've made years ago that we're going to do a little bit of this, but we're not going to do a whole lot of it because of time. If I had 15 extra minutes every day, we would do more, because I do believe that dictation is super important. But the objective here is to track the transition of the individual student from just passively listening and having no idea what they're hearing and echoing it back to active musical translation. Again, that whole language of music is the goal. So we're going to use short periodic dictation checks. This could be formal or informal. We keep a piece of staff paper in the choir folder, and that can be as simple as the very beginning of the school year, playing an F, teaching them how to draw a treble clef, showing them where an F goes on the staff, and then having them all write it down in their folder, and then playing them 4 beats of quarter notes. It could be, and I don't have perfect pitch, so don't judge me, but it could be being played on the piano, play it several times, ask them to audiate it, try to figure out, translate that into solfege. And on the very first time that they do it, I could even sometimes just ask them to write down solfege syllable first letters. Do, re, mi, do. They start to work that out. They just write down D, R, M, D. Turn around and show it to me. Correct. All right, let's move on with rehearsal. Now that can progress into them learning how to draw the quarter notes, put them on the staff correctly, including other rhythms gradually as we go. Eventually, we get to the point by the end of the semester when we formally assess this skill that we're using sight reading factory exercises again, because now I turn the sight reading factory exercise around and I play from it so that they know ahead of the test, how hard is this dictation going to be? And I can tell them your test's going to be level 2. Okay. Now they know what patterns that are possible, and that helps them figure out what they're hearing and how to write it down. So this, and the other thing I'll say about this type of assessment and keeping track individually of these kids as they go is that by the end of the semester, you have their paper if you want to look at it. Usually I just keep track in my head on this one. I just see which kids are struggling and which kids aren't. But we also can do it without paper. You can do it with their eyes closed and show me on your hands what you just heard. Now that's a great way really quickly, without any paper or pencil, just to see if the kid is understanding or not understanding. Because the ones that understand will show you the hand signs pretty confidently, and the ones that are having trouble differentiating between the intervals will just kind of flop their wrist limply, and you'll know right away which kids need those reinforcements. So the tool that this helps build for students is error detection. We are helping them track the patterns that they are struggling with. It helps the students identify if their bottleneck or their confusion source is from their ear to their brain or from their eye to their voice when they're reading. And the tool for the teacher is that we have these short, very easy to accomplish assessments of individual ability in a class size, unlimited class size. Okay, next up, the next tool is tracking the whole singer and building a database on the whole singer and their buy-in outside of class. We keep a Google spreadsheet. We do this at the very, very end of the year. It's a Google form that, for us, measures our lettering system. So our lettering system awards points for everything the student chooses to do that makes them a better singer outside of class. The way I explain it to them is that we are a co-curricular program. Choir is a co-curricular class. An important portion of what we do is an academic class like any other. This is the speech I give at the beginning of the It's academic in the same way that your math class is academic. There are skills that you need to learn and demonstrate that you got better at and can do and can master and become proficient. And the way we reward those things in class is through your grade. That's how that process works. And all of the graded elements of the class, everyone has to do. They are part of taking the class. But because we're co-curricular, we also have an extracurricular portion, which means that we have things that kids can do to become better singers that they don't have to do. They can opt into them in the same way that you don't have to go join the volleyball team. You try out, you opt in to the volleyball team. So we offer kids a curricular path and a co-curricular path, and we keep track of how many kids and what percentage of kids and how frequently are kids opting into those choices to participate through our lettering program. So that could include things like who's choosing to take extra ensembles to small ensemble festival, who's choosing to take a solo, who's choosing to take voice lessons, who sings in their church choir, who does musicals outside of school in the summer, who does summer choir camps, who does America's Got Talent auditions. I mean, I don't really care. It's really anything that puts a student in a situation that they're becoming more proficient and confident with their own singing voice. And we even have a place on our form to just say, hey, there might be things you're doing that I don't even know about, and they don't have it on the form, so tell me about it. We'll see how many points that's worth. Another one, singing national anthems at sports games on campus. That can all earn them lettering points. And at the end of the year, they fill in to a form, which you can also find on my Patreon drive, my shared Google Drive. You can find that form there, and they enter in the form, and they hit submit once, and then we use tabulation in a spreadsheet to figure out not only who's lettered, but then I can use that information on every graduating class, going all the way back to 2013 in my case, of how we are doing as teachers, engaging and inspiring kids to choose to do those extra things. In my program, for example, we've been going through a couple years now of seeing that our sight reading scores are going way, way up, but our individual choices to do stuff outside of class are going down. So we had a pretty major intervention, but without that data, I wouldn't have been able to prove it to the kids. Hey guys, we're actually going down in this area. We need to get going back up, and we're going to really encourage you and prioritize the kids who want to do the special cool things. We got to do the work. And the result of that next year is that we've already got a whole bunch more kids back and engaged because I was able to show them the data. This is important for students. Sometimes we just sleep through things and we sleep on things. But with this data going back to 2013, I was able to show them that as a program, not just you, Tammy, it's not your fault, but as a program, we're doing less of these things. And in order for us to be as good as we were then, we need to do all these things. So it's been a wonderful thing. And it also, again, informs me that, hey, I need to step up and be more inspiring because kids are not choosing to do these things as much. And the last thing that we keep regular data on is student choices to return to choir, their enrollment attitudes. Now, we keep track of this for obvious reasons. We want to know who's coming back so we can be ready, but we also want to know if we are losing kids, why. In some situations, we can do something about that. In some situations, we can't. So, for example, if it's a kid who wants, I want choir to be the easy A that I thought it was. I thought I could show up and just move my mouth and I have to do stuff in this class, which some kids are honest enough to tell me that. In which case I say, more power to you. I hope you find something else. This is not the place for you. And I know that is like sacrilege for choir people to have somebody say, well, choir is not actually for everyone. It does need to be to find kids that really want to work on themselves, to make themselves better, to be accountable to a group. It's a team sport with an individual component. But what we're also discovering through that form is that we're helping kids feel like they matter because we want to know how they feel. That's a great way for us to know how they feel. So we are tracking the human element, why they stay, why they leave, and what the culture looks like from the inside, the things that they wouldn't necessarily tell us every day. So what we do here is about 2 to 3 weeks before enrollment decisions are due. Like the students have to make their final decision about what class they're going to be in. We ask them to fill out their choir future survey. Also, you can find this one in the drive. We ask some crucial questions like if you're returning, what are your goals for the future? You're coming back to choir. That's great. What do you want to accomplish in choir over the course of your time? If you are leaving, why? What is it that is causing you to leave? Is it a scheduling conflict? You just don't like this class. You don't want to work hard, whatever. They have open-ended opportunities to tell us. In the program that I teach in, we have a pretty darn good retention rate of anywhere between 80 and 95% of a group of kids, a graduating class from 9th to 10th grade. And then, of course, we go from 10th to 11th and 11th to 12th, those requirements of graduation start to take its toll, and we might lose a few kids each year from there. But for the most part, we're up in that 70 to 80% retention of all the kids that take the class, and once will take it all 4 years. And I know that because I've kept data since 2013 when Google Drive must have been invented in 2013. I feel like that's where all my spreadsheets start. But I have that information and I can go back and look for patterns. And that's really, really helpful. What was going on? Like, for example, I can go in and look for what were the lowest years? Well, what was going on in those years that might have caused our lowest retention to happen? I can reflect on, was that a bad year for me personally? Was that a bad year for our staff? Was that a bad year in the building for some other reason? Those types of things. And we can reflect and we can make adjustments. I think most importantly with this one, this helps me with my own blind spots about how kids are feeling. It's a great way for me to see when things are going well or not well, but I just didn't know why. And I'm going to throw one more in there. I didn't really think of this as data until right now. I'm thinking off the cuff. I've got notes here in front of me, but this is not on my notes. I'll add it later for the Patreon and Substack paid subscribers. When you go in, you'll see my notes as well. I'll drop these in the Google Drive. But another one I'm going to throw in here real quick is keeping track of the changing voice. What we'll do sometimes is, and I need to be better about this. We talked about doing this more last year. We only did it a little bit. We need to do it more, is keeping track of where the voice breaks are, the passaggos are, especially with the boys, but it is important with the girls as well. What is the range? What is the comfortable tessitura? It can be done very, very quickly and very easy, but also through a Google spreadsheet, a Google form that becomes a spreadsheet. What I'm trying to do with all of these data things is make it clickable, submittable, and then sortable later. That way in a large choir class, I'm not having to take detailed notes on big piles of paper or type out long paragraphs or any of those things. Having all of this information of the categories we're putting the kids in for their performance in preset language, where all we have to do is click and save. That makes all of this doable in a large class. So to kind of wrap this up, data is an advocacy tool for the program. That is one really important role that data serves, but it also is how I evaluate myself. This is way more important than administrative or even student evaluations. Our students do evaluate their teachers as well. Administrators come in and give me an evaluation. I don't honestly care or even look at those anymore. What I care about is, are the kids learning to do stuff well? And are they learning to know stuff about music? And how can I prove it? How do I know? As I said in the introduction, if we're not allowing kids or requiring kids to all go through the process of individual accountability for individual work, then I will go ahead and again say that we are not teaching them and we cannot prove that they know it. If I stand next to you and I sing something, I can mimic you within a fraction of a second. And I can fool you into thinking I know the song. This is an exercise that I proved to my kids this process in the very first week of school. I have them close their eyes and I tell them to hum along with me on the piano. And I simply improvise a melody slowly and then faster and faster. And the ability for them to basically sing what I am playing is almost instantaneous. And they look up and I say, and they open their eyes and I say, "Do you hear how pretty that was? Do you hear how easy that was?" So I'm going to suggest to you that if you are not learning to read the music without this piano, you're not learning to sound things out on your own, then you could pretend to be reading the music all year long and you'd never get better at it. And they look at me and they go, "Yeah, you just proved it." Because it's almost impossible to tell because of how quickly they can get to the pitch that they just heard that they are following. And so we want to give the kids, every kid, an opportunity to prove that they are the ones generating the music. The music is coming from them. When we do this, we are also giving the kids the power to listen to their final recording from their concert and say to themselves, even the shyest ones, "I did that." Because we did that is great also. But kids with low self-esteem will allow themselves to disappear inside of the we very quickly, because they'll know deep down that they weren't the ones that were doing that or processing that music or generating that music, and the music wasn't coming from them. They were following someone. Individual data, individual tracking proves to them that they are good enough and that their voice matters. So I'd encourage you to think about these things and maybe implement some or all of these in your classroom. And as I threw in there throughout the episode, if you want to see the actual rubrics that I use, I know this might make me seem like a jerk. I get it. But I do reserve those actual rubrics for paid subscribers. And the reason I do that is because this is my job. And I have to use the crucial group of people. Right now, it's a little bit over 200 people that are subscribing by choosing to send $3 or all the way up to $20 a month to just help me pay the bills of this program. And the way I reward the people that choose to do that is to give them access to all of my materials. So some people do teachers pay teachers and sell the actual PDFs and et cetera. I don't do it that way. I do it by just opening up my whole Google Drive for people who are choosing to stick around month to month and pay so that I can keep doing this show. Anywhere from $3 all the way to $20. I mean, I guess somebody could go above $20 if they really just wanted to help out, but that's the range. So it's anybody's level of financial ability will be able to access this stuff if they really want it. Now, I would say that this episode, these types of episodes, this is why I don't feel bad about charging for these things, is that from what I've described here, somebody could also go create their own rubrics, and that's fine too. And if you don't want to pay for mine by going into the Google Drive, that's fine. But I would still encourage you to consider these ideas as a way for you to build infrastructure in your classroom so that you can track and give the kids the gift of knowing that they are individually making this music. So thanks for sticking around to listen to this. I will mention again, right before I'll go out here on this shorter than normal episode, is again to head over to the Substack. The Substack is also free. We'll just keep this in category of things I don't feel bad about. I publish content every week, probably the biggest publisher of choral music content in the world at this point, and 95% of it is free. So I don't feel bad about charging for 5% of it. Go over to the Substack, choralosophy.substack.com. The subscription there, you can do a free subscription, or you can do a paid subscription that gives you access to all the stuff I just talked about. But the free newsletter will have an aggregation or a summary of all of my first days of school or first days of choir from last summer and all of the Give Them Tools series in one blog form. So like a one-stop shop, short little bullets of what each of the episodes contain so that you can work your way through that in an efficient way. You can click on the link to the YouTube video or to the website episode hub and see that individual episode if you want to dig deeper on, say, rhythm tools, or if you want to dig deeper on day one of choir, if you want to dig deeper on voicing your choir, for example, or if you want to dig deeper on some later on, you can come back to this episode on data tracking. And that will be on Substack, and you can subscribe there for free and favorite that episode. Keep it in your personal Google Drive, whatever it is that you want to do. And I hope that becomes a useful resource for you there. Thanks, everybody. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of a conversation. If you are still hearing my voice, that means you're one of the MVPs, one of the diehards, one of the real ones, as the kids say. So if you are willing on the way out to check out a few different ways that you can help me continue to make this show high quality. One, use the promo code. That's the biggest one. At Sight Reading Factory, at mymusicfolders.com, at mychoirropes.com, at graphitepublishing.com, and endeavormusicpublishing.com. All of those take the Choralosophy checkout code. And of course now the newest one is 3-Minute Theory. You can get a 15% discount when you enter Choralosophy at checkout there. And of course, going to Apple Podcasts and leaving a positive review is very helpful there, and sharing the episodes to your colleagues in real life and on social media. All of those things are incredibly helpful and allow me to continue to create this resource for you. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.